Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. And welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. Of course, I'm your host, Brad Minus, and I am super lucky to have Shana Meyerson. She is the founder of YOGAthletica, where she teaches online yoga, in-person yoga, and she's amazing. But her story of how she got there is nothing short of amazing. How are you doing today, Shana?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Brad. It's great to be here.
Oh, we appreciate it so much. And of course, the first question, as I ask everybody, Shana, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what was the complement of your family, and what was it like to be Shana as a kid?
Sure. So I could just preface this by saying I was such the proverbial middle child. So if anybody's a middle child, they're going to be like that. So I was one of four. In fact, I had an older sister who got the privilege of the oldest. I had a younger sister who was way younger. She got the privilege of being a baby. And then my brother and I in the middle, he was the only boy. And then there was just Shana in the middle. It sounds like a sitcom, but I have to say that because of being just Shana, I guess you would call it, I was the overachiever that ever hit first grade, right? I can remember even as a child, my specific strategies that I would create to make sure that I was always ahead of the curve. I mean, I was just born that way. And I think that what was super defining about my childhood and why it led it really to where I am today is there's no other real word for it. I was the golden child, right? Because as a middle child, you have to be, or you just get lost in the shuffle, right? I never got anything less than an A, ever. I was AP everything. I was the captain of every team. I was the president of every club. I was selected by the U.S. Congress to represent my district at the National Model Congress. If there was an honor, I got it. And it sounds great. But the problem is that when you live that kind of childhood and you're always being showered with praise, you become a praise junkie, right? And everything is about, it's not a hubris. It wasn't that at all, but it was just, I was so used to, oh, Shana has this under control. Shana will nail that. Shana will win that. Shana, whatever, which is great and wonderful, right? Until the day you wake up to the thin letter that says you didn't get into Stanford. And when you went 17 years without any thin letters, it was pure devastation.
Wow.
I thought my life was over. Literally, I'm like, this is where it ends. This is what I've been working for 17 years, and I'd never really experienced rejection for all those years in any serious way. And my life changed that day. And I can look back and laugh about it now, but I was a competitive tennis player. And that weekend, I was the number one seed at the U.S. State tournament that I was in, junior circuit. Number one seed, okay? I'm in my first match. I lost the first game. Now, if you know anything about tennis, right, there's a minimum of six games in a set, and you play a minimum of 2 sets, right? And I lost one game, and I walked off, and I never played tennis again for 25 years. That, when I say that my life just fell over, I could laugh about it now. And it was such a stupid, on every level, decision, emotional moment that I couldn't turn back from. But why is this important? Because from 17 years old till I discovered yoga when I was 30, I thought my life was worth nothing. I went from Shana can do anything to Shana couldn't do the one thing in life the one thing that was the most important. She couldn't do it. And so it made for a really difficult, like post-college experience, because I very much like just held on to that rejection and allowed it to define me.
Okay. So I think let me step back just a minute and go, okay. So when you say that you lost that game, you lost that game after learning that you didn't make it to, okay. So the reason why you walked up, okay. So I thought it was like almost two separate things. Like,
No, it was
everything right. You didn't get into Stanford.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, cause I was going to say, I don't care how good you are. You're going to at least lose one game a set. Yeah.
Games wasn't weird for me.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it was.
But it was the combination.
Like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with tennis, like right now.
Okay. Wow.
And I mean, keep in mind again, like that was I was in all AP classes, but I was still practicing tennis a minimum of 3 hours every day after school. During summer, I had matches from sun up until the lights went off. I was just like, this was my life.
You were committed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say you took AP classes and that you excelled in school, there are some people that can go to school, they can sit in class, they can do their homework and they can get all those A's and they can get APs and stuff. Did you find that you actually had to work at it, or did you find that some of the things were okay? I could ride through this and get an A without a problem, but obviously tennis, you were like, no, 3 hours a day, you made sure of it. But in school, did you find that maybe school came easier, or did you work just as hard in school as you did with tennis?
The AP curriculum at my school was insane. I mean, it was so insane that I did wind up going not to Stanford, but to an Ivy League school. And even though I went to public school for high school, I was far more prepared for school than any of the prep school kids there. I mean, we had a rigorous AP curriculum at my school. So to answer your question, I would study till like 1 a.m., like most nights, but I also always had something of a photographic memory to an extent. Like on an exam, if I needed to come up with an answer, I could literally picture it on the page and I could read it in my head where the answer was. But it wasn't instant, but I did have that. If I read a page enough times, that I could literally tell you exactly on the page what the words were and what they said.
At my best, there was like certain things. I think what it was is if I was interested in the subject, like if I was truly interested in the subject, I could rattle off some things just like what you said. If I'm looking at the test, I can go back and I can see it. If I wasn't interested in it though, and was just learning it to learn it, I couldn't remember darn anything, not at all. But yet, and the reason why I asked this is that I have a nephew, and my nephew, when he went to school, would go to school when he was mainstreamed, and he would go to school and he'd sit in class and tests would come up 99%, 100%, 98%, 99%, never touched a book. Failed had to redo 8th grade because he didn't turn his homework in. Sure. But nailed all of the tests. Yeah. He just sit there and nail all the tests. But refused to do his homework.
Not me. I've always been like, I know this is going to sound weird because as an entrepreneur, like I've made all my own rules, like really made all my own rules because I created an industry. But the flip side of that is I've always been a rule follower. And I've always done everything by the book. And so no, I studied very hard, but I had very good habits and wonderful parents who really put a very high value on education. And all 4 of us were straight A students, but none of us ever once had to be asked to do our homework ever or study or anything. Just
what do you attribute that to?
I attribute, honestly, so I'm Jewish. I come from a home that has really strong Jewish values, and I think that one of the things that has like made the Jewish people exceptional in the world has been our emphasis on education. And so my parents are very highly educated. All my grandparents, including the grandmothers, which was rare in that generation, at least they both had their college degrees. I think my Bubby might have had a master's in teaching, in fact, which was rare, right? And so I think it's just a family value.
Okay. So it was more expected, and it was just
100%
before you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
What did your parents do?
Okay, so now you're going to laugh. My mother is an SAT prep expert, and she was doing it. Well, no, I mean, it's where.
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
She was doing it in the 70s before SAT prep was a thing. Like, there was no Princeton Review. There was no Kaplan. Like, none of this existed. She started teaching SATs in the 70s, which is one of the reasons why I rocked my SATs.
Of course.
Which didn't
take advantage of your resources.
Yeah, I got the highest SATs in my class, but I was sitting in it. So talk about overachievement. I used to sit in on her SAT classes like as often as I could since 7th or 8th grade. I was like sitting with the seniors, and I'm just like, I loved it. In my free time, I would do the math exams because I loved math.
Oh my God. No wonder. No wonder. You had 10 years of practice before you took the SAT. Yeah. Most people are a couple of months. You got 10 years.
Yeah. I definitely scored big on that one. And my dad was originally a lawyer, but he left that, got into real estate.
That's interesting. My dad wasn't a lawyer, but he was an accountant, but he got into real estate as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Must be something in the Jewish blood.
In the water.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay. So all right. So go ahead. We'll praise you. Tell us what Ivy school you went to.
Oh, it's embarrassing today. I went to Cornell.
Wow. That's not embarrassing. Not at all. You talking Cornell is, please. Cornell is still an Ivy League school. It is still hard to get into. Don't be embarrassed. Not at all. There's no reason for it. And you studied
like all yoga teachers, I studied industrial and labor relations.
Yes.
I went to the ILR school, so Cornell is 7 colleges. And the ILR school is like the pre-law school. And it's only 150 kids per class. It's a very small school. And out of 150 kids in my class, if I'm not mistaken, we got 50 kids into Harvard Law. It's a feeder school. Right. And so my original intention was to become a lawyer like my father and my grandfather. Not only did I pivot hard, but I actually graduated a year early because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. This isn't what and I did, have an A- average because it's hard to get through college by doing double like the work for 2 years. But I was definitely on a different path than I wound up in. And I think that's the beauty of life's journey. Like, you never know what is sitting just around the corner. You just don't know.
No, I hear you. So I started college in 1984 because we were looking it up as I was trying to find schools and get ready and all that stuff. I'm sorry. I didn't start that. I take that back. That was high school. I started in 1988. In 1988, I started college, and when we were doing all of the research at that time, the average freshman changed their major 7 times. I don't know if it's still that way, but at that time, I still remember it. They're like, because I changed my major, Dad. Okay, you got 6 more times.
That's funny. At Cornell, the big joke, because Cornell has, oddly enough, like this hotel management school. It's the best hotel school in America, which doesn't seem very like Ivy League. And they always said that, like all of us said, that organic chem was the class that turned pre-med into hotelies.
That's funny. Oh my God.
It did, by the way. I was never either one of those, but I know multiple friends who took that path.
Jeez, and they're probably making big dollars right now. So
not everything's about dollars.
Yeah. Well, back then, that was the driving force at that point, and we didn't.
Yeah, you and I are just 1 year apart. I went to college in 89. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. But so it was all about, all right, well, what are you going to do out of here to make the money? Even my parents were like that. So because I started in a fine arts degree.
Oh,
And my parents were always they're all sitting there like, well, what are you going to do with that? You need to do something else to have something to work on. You know what I mean? So like I turned fine arts into communications, broadcast and public relations, which a lot of the classes spilled over into what I wanted to do in the first place, was acting. I was a theater. I started as a theater major. So yeah. So, I mean, and so it's like, oh, well, you got to do something that's going to make you some money. That's a whole different story. Well, so you got it at Cornell. And what was your next step?
So I decided that instead of being a lawyer, I was going to go to Hollywood. I mean, I'm from here. I'm from California, from Southern California. But I decided I was going to be a screenwriter instead. So I got a job at ICM, which is talent agency, that year was the number 2 talent agency in the world. Now, like, there's so many conglomerations and stuff, but it's still like top 2 or 3. And I worked in the film industry for about 7 years doing script development, which is, it's like, but what is script development? Script development is basically the concept of like editing someone else's screenplay, like what a normal person would think of as editing, right? I mean, not grammatically, but helping them with their story structure and stuff. But I never quit my job to become a screenwriter myself. It was always something I did on the side, which meant I was never going to succeed. If you want to get into a cutthroat industry, you can't do it as a side hustle. It doesn't work that way.
Especially back then when we didn't have the electronics where you're sitting on you can't be sitting on your lunch break dictating into your phone scripts and like doing other stuff on the side, which you can now. Back then, it wasn't a typewriter or a word processor that weighed 200 pounds.
Right.
So there was none of that. Whereas now you probably still can't, I believe. I've maintained some of my performing arts.
Yeah.
But even then it's still pretty hard, but wow.
Yeah.
So,
and then I left there. I got a job. This was again like super weird. I've had like the weirdest professional background. I got a job as like a Microsoft product specialist, which was basically their traveling roadshow. I had never used Microsoft products. I was always a Mac person since it was like a box on my desk. And I got this weird, fabulous job with them. I loved it. And from there, like everybody at the turn of the century, I went into the .com world and then also simultaneously decided to get my MBA. So I was working and also going to school here at UCLA for my MBA.
Yeah. At the turn of the century.
At the turn of the century.
You should probably guess the date.
Which century?
My graduation for my MBA. December 1999.
Oh, 1999. Okay.
Yep. Washington, D.C.
You partied.
Yep. I got my MBA. Yeah. I was in the military at the time. But yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, so you said turn of the century. You got your MBA. And I'm like, December 1999.
Yeah. I actually
started. Oh, okay.
And I didn't even start in 2000. I started 2001. But I'm speaking general turn of the century, not like January 1st, 2000.
Oh, all right. Well, I was just, no, I mean, you're still turning the century, but when you said that, I'm like, no one got their MBA like at the turn of the century like I did.
Yeah.
So I was like, I thought you were going to say like 2000, like you got it. I'm like, oh, look at that. Look how much we're close. I did performing arts. You worked in screenwriting. Right. We both had our MBAs around the same time. We both went to school starting at the same time. Except I went to second tier schools and you went to Ivy League schools. That's okay.
Well, UCLA is Ivy League, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's still up there. So there's somewhere around this time. Is this about somewhere around this time is when you started just picking up yoga?
Yeah. And I didn't want to interrupt you per se. I did not complete my MBA. So as the person who completes everything, like, I am a completer. Like every day I have a massive task list that I keep. I've got one in my Outlook and I have one on my Mac too, like depending on how important it is. And I mark off every single task every single day. There is no sleeping until every task is done. That's the person I am. So believe me that not completing my MBA was a thing. So I discovered yoga while I was at school, and I decided to, so I'll fast forward and we can go backwards if we want to, but I was one of the first people in the Western world to teach yoga to children. I had a vision, and so I started this market. So now I had a job, I had started a new company, and I was getting my MBA all at the same time. And something had to give. It turned out it was two things. I left my career and UCLA because mini yogis got very big very fast. But do you want to hear the funny story?
Yes.
So mini yogis was very successful very quickly because I created a market. I had no competition. And I was halfway through my MBA program, and I was in a class with probably about 30 peers. And the professor, apropos of nothing, I mean, like out of it, nowhere, says to the class, and it was so weird. He goes, Ms. Meyerson is not an entrepreneur. He goes, simply teaching yoga to children does not make one an entrepreneur. And like your face. So the funny thing was, I'm one of two entrepreneurs in the class. Like I was one of two people who actually had a business. And I stood up and I'm like, excuse me. I'm like, I created a product.
Yeah.
I created a market and I'm making a living at it. I'm like, what is your definition of an entrepreneur? And I walked out and I never went back. That was the end of my MBA. I decided that it wasn't serving me to be there. I wasn't appreciated. I did get this attitude from a lot of professors at UCLA who it was all about finance and they're like yoga for kids. Like they thought it was ridiculous. Here's what's funny, Brad. 1 year later, that was the cover story for entrepreneurmagazine.com.
Oh, that was an FU to those friggin', that was great. That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah.
Now, they were all electronic already at that point, but it was their top banner article. Yes, I sent it to him.
I would have sent it to all of them.
Well, I mean, the truth is that, like, first of all, the fellow students were very supportive of me. Like, your faith, like, when he said that, like, I'm telling you, the air was sucked out of the room. He literally dismissed everybody when I walked out because everybody was like, why would you say that? Like, that was so inappropriate. We admire what she's doing. She's not on a path that any of us is on, but isn't that what an entrepreneur is? But listen, to his credit, after I very unhumbly sent him the article, he actually invited me in to talk to his class about entrepreneurship, which was very kind, and he apologized. So it's all good. It's just funny.
Oh, no, it's very funny. Did you ever see Act to School, Rodney Dangerfield?
Yes, I did.
That's what do you remember? Do you know the scene I'm thinking of?
I don't remember much about it. I remember seeing it like in the last 10 years for a second time and going, wow, this is surprisingly funny.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So Rodney Dangerfield walks into his business class.
Okay.
And it's his first one. And he's sitting there and the teacher is the business school and he's like going everything, all theory. Like, and Rodney Dangerfield just sitting there. This guy doesn't want to hear. You can't do it. He's like, Mr. I forgot what they called him. Mr. Dangerfield, do you have something to say? And I'm like, I don't know where you're trying to build this thing. Fantasyland?
Right.
And he's like, where's the money to grease the Teamsters? What are you going to do about the building inspectors? What are you going to do?
Right.
He goes, we don't do business that way. Well, then you're not going to do business at all. And everybody like looks back to him and everything. Oh my God. It was like absolutely probably the funniest one of the funniest scenes in there. And there's a lot of really funny scenes, but you remind me of that because you basically say him saying, you're not an entrepreneur, and you walk out of there and like, F you, and you get on Entrepreneurial Magazine. That's fantastic. But but we need to step back then real quick is your entry into yoga, because you went right to teaching to many kids, and we didn't even get to the point where you like, what got you into yoga to start with?
Right. So I was always an intense athlete, as previously mentioned. Even though my tennis career ended quite abruptly, I still continued my athletics very much. And I one day was walking around my apartment and I ran into a piece of furniture. Yes, I'm old. It was a CD cabinet. If anybody knows what a CD is. And I broke my pinky toe. And so I couldn't do like the writing, the running, the biking, the things that I was used to every day. So as my foot was getting better and I knew I could stand on it, but I still couldn't wear a shoe and certainly couldn't do any sort of impact. I'm like, there was somebody at the gym, which I used to go at 4 to 7 every morning, who was telling me for years about this like yoga class I had to try. I'm like, right, yoga. Like, I'm going to sit on the floor and hum. That sounds right up my alley. And when my foot was healing, I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to sit on the floor and hum. Like, maybe I'll just try it. And so had you told me a minute before I walked into that yoga class that I would ever be a yoga teacher, much less for the last 22 and a half years, I would have laughed in your face. But that class, like, I fell in love on such a visceral level. And if we can go full circle here back to like baby Shana, overachiever, golden child Shana, failure Shana, judgmental, my life is over Shana, walks into yoga Shana. And it was the first time in my life, I was almost 30. It was just a few weeks before my 30th birthday. It was the first time that anybody ever told me that it was okay to fall. And I don't blame my parents for that. There was no reason for them to tell me that because I never fell.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, believe me, when I didn't get in Stanford, there was a lot of like, it's okay to fall, but it was a little too late. And that was not only the biggest revelation of my entire life, but all I could think was, why didn't anyone tell me this when I was 3? And that's where mini yogis came from. And though YOGAthletica at this point, and that's a whole nother story, is my much bigger business, my adult yoga. I hate saying adult yoga because it like now it like feels, are you naked? No, I'm not naked. It's just not my kid yoga. But I still do mini yogis in a big way. It's just YOGAthletica has become my predominant focus. But that was really why I decided to leave my career and to leave business school and leave my perceived future 100% behind me. I didn't know if I'd ever earn another dollar. And back then, yoga instructors were earning an average of $17,000 a year. I was earning 6 figures within about 2 or 3 years maximum, and it paid off. What could I say? But let's go back one more time to remember how I said I was never willing to quit a job to become a screenwriter. Well, I quit everything to be a yoga teacher. And that's why God provides. When you say, this is who I am, who I need to be, and the message that I need to bring to the world, God's like, okay, here.
I think, and God provides us with a route to passion. He doesn't give it to you, but he might give you the guiding steps to the route. I think that there's something to say about you hitting your pinky toe, right? And not being able to do anything.
That's right.
And still knowing that you were going to go to the gym either way, and going to do what you could, and then providing you with a person just bantering you about going to yoga just to get you in that one time.
Right.
And for them to show you the path and they showed you the path. And yeah, I just think that's the way to think about it rather than people, it might have gone a different way. You know, I mean, I've talked to some people that lost their jobs and it was out of desperation, picked up things like affiliate marketing, you know, because of the desperation, but then loved it.
Right.
And then made 3, 4, 5 times what they were earning in their job.
Right.
Did they have to go through some hard stuff? Yeah. And I imagine you did too.
Sure. Well, you want to hear something else crazy?
Sure.
So what you're saying, like, yes, like everything is good news, bad news. You think something's really bad, but you never know where it's going to take you. And also life is very nonlinear. Everyone thinks like, oh, like I left this job, so therefore I have this job. It's not just that. I lived in this city and therefore I have this job. I broke up with this guy, therefore I have this. Like your whole life changes with every decision. So to say like everything is just work is ridiculous. But so remember, when you leave a job, you don't get unemployment insurance or anything. Like I was like, leap, right? And I left the job. At that point, I was doing writing for an interactive learning company. Way before interactive learning was a thing. This is turn of the century. I mean, this was crazy. And I left, and the next week, I get a call from somebody. This was before LinkedIn. I don't even know how this happened. And they said, we need somebody to write this project for us. Can you write it for us? Now, keep in mind, freelance writing, you get to do on your own time. You can do it in the middle of the night. So it's perfect when you're starting a business. And I'm pretty articulate. I'm a very facile writer. I had been a writer for many years. So when they're like, we'll pay you for whatever, 400 hours. I don't know what the project was anymore. This was 22 years ago. I could finish it in 50 and finish it really well. Because you have to revise if you don't. It's not like you could be like, oh, okay, here, bye, right?
Right.
And like to the day, basically, when that ended, I was earning as much teaching yoga as I had been at my previous job.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm telling you, God was like, it was a calling. It was a calling.
Wow.
I'm lucky. I'm blessed.
Do you want to know something? We have such parallels.
Yeah.
First job out of the military.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, second job. My second job out of the military, because I worked on contract. I worked for the Department of Labor.
Okay.
What they called the ADL Collab.
Okay.
Advanced Distant Learning. Collab.
Oh.
Right. Which have you ever heard? Have you ever heard of SCORM? SCORM.
I don't know.
And I can't remember the acronym, but it's modules, object. Anyway, it was the standard for interactive learning.
So crazy.
It was the start. I was on the board to make the standards.
No way.
For interactive e-learning.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Right? That's what I'm saying. I mean, the parallels are ridiculous.
You want to hear something else crazy?
Yeah.
One of the projects I did, there was this Harvard professor named Gary Hamel, and he's an innovation expert. Like he talks about radical innovation. That's his area of expertise. And I had taken his book, not like for the company I was working for, not like I did it. It wasn't like freelance or anything. And I turned it into an interactive like learning thing. Do you know that when I went to UCLA for business school, the first book they assigned for me was the one that I basically wrote?
Oh my God. I can't imagine you walking in there and you're and like spitting out stuff from the book and barely touching it.
Well, I mean, I had memorized the book. I had to rewrite the whole entire thing into interactive format.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That would have been the biggest laugh. It would have been the biggest, like, I can't imagine, like a relief. All right, well, I don't have to worry about this class.
That's right. I'll leave this book. And I'll tell you something else. As part of that, I had to create a radical innovation for grocery stores, which is so random. You know what I thought of? That computers were pretty nascent back then.
Right.
But I'm like, people can send in probably fax. We were still using faxes back then. their orders to a store, somebody will gather their stuff and put it in a locker where they can pick it up.
That's awesome.
20 years later, Amazon Locker comes out.
Right. And our grocery stores are doing pickup.
Sure.
Where they're doing that exact same thing, except they're bringing them out to your car instead of you going to a locker.
Yeah, but I was like the locker, the key, the code, the whole thing. Like,
that's
crazy.
Yep. That's amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, I know.
I'm a millionaire.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. So you start mini kit. So what were you told us the idea for how you came up with yoga mini yogis. Yeah. You told us that idea. And then, so at what point did you turn or move mini yogis into YOGAthletica?
Well, I mean, I was doing them simultaneously.
Oh, they came in together. Okay.
So I have so many stories. I don't know if you want to hear all my stories.
Of course. That's why we're here. We want to know. These where the nuggets come from.
Okay, this is funny, actually. So I decided I was going to start mini yogis, and I was looking for a niche, right? Like, who am I going to send this to? And I decided, I mean, this is so weird. I'm like, what circles am I in? Like, who can I market to? And I came up with Jewish. Like, that was like the best I could come up with. Okay. So I made this flyer and it said, putting the Om back in Shalom. And I did, yes, a fax blast. Okay. Because this was like 2001, 2002. And I just sent it to like all the temples that had like preschools, right? Now, here's what's funny. I'm like, okay, so Chabad, which is the ultra Orthodox, I know, but not everybody knows that. Yeah. Like the ones with the hats and the things and the jackets. Yeah. They're super, super religious, but there's a lot of them around here. And I'm like, well, should I even bother sending it to Chabad of Westwood? Because it's very close to me. And I'm like, you know what? It's a matter of typing in 10 numbers. Who cares? Just send it. So I sent it. They were the first person to reply. I'd sent out probably 100 of them. The rabbi calls me immediately and he says, my wife was just telling me she wants to start yoga. Do you work with adults? Now, the answer was I wasn't working with anybody, but I said, yes, of course I do. And so I started working with her like literally that week. Here's what's funny. Okay. This is why if you see a chance, you take it. Even if it seems like this is ridiculous, just say yes to everything. So you don't have to live in LA to understand what I'm about to tell you. In LA, there's a family called the Cunins, okay? They are like the Chabad royalty. There's like 12 boys and a girl, and each one got a congregation. Now, let me start rattling off the congregations, and if you see a pattern. Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Malibu, Santa Monica. Right. Okay. So what's the pattern? Brentwood.
All very upper class.
That's right. They got all the wealthiest communities in Los Angeles only. Like you can have downtown LA. We'll take Brentwood. Right. And so what happened was I start working with this woman and she says, my sister-in-law in Pacific Palisades, again, another very affluent area, has a summer camp. Are you willing? Could you teach yoga to the kids? It gets better. So I said, yes. And so I did. And she goes, my sister-in-law in Malibu has a preschool. Can you teach there? Yes. I'm teaching there. And they say, you know what? Our mommy and me group could really use a yoga teacher. Can you teach there? Yes. Our women's group needs yoga. Can you teach there? Yes. But here's where it gets interesting. Then somebody there says, my husband at Hughes Research Labs wants yoga at HRL. Will you work there? Now I'm out of Chabad. Now I'm like in the world, right? And then I'm working with their wives literally my entire business. And I was booked solid. This is what I'm saying. I was earning six figures very quickly. I was booked solid like immediately. It was all because of that one fax that I wasn't going to send to some religious rabbi in Westwood.
That's amazing. All from a rabbi coming up to you and going, my wife, she's looking at doing some yoga. You think you can help her? Yeah. And you go, of course I can help her. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, again, like these surprises that come out of nowhere, like you just don't know. And so I've been handed, by the grace of God, just so many opportunities. It's obscene. And,
So the lesson there definitely is, even if you think it's not going to pan out, even if the stereotypical idea in your head is that's probably not going to work, do it anyway. What's the worst that can happen is your flyer, your email, whatever gets 86.
Exactly.
That's the worst thing that can happen, right? Nothing, no one's coming after you. No spam police is coming after you. You know what I mean? Make the call, send the fax, send the email, put up the flyer, do whatever. And if it works, and you never know.
Ever since that day, I'm like, no matter what the question, for me, the answer is always yes. I'll figure it out later. If you want something from me, I'll make it happen.
It's a great story. There's a personal development coach. Her name is Laura Langmeyer. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
Laura Langmeyer. So she self-made. She has a book called The Power of Yes.
Okay, yeah.
She talks about that she was just coming out of college, and in her spare time, she was teaching, and to make a little extra money while she was in school, was like doing group fitness classes.
Okay.
And she got approached by the head of an oil company that had a few oil rigs, and is asked, hey, will you build, develop, and run a fitness center on the oil rig?
Oh my goodness.
So she's like, she was, instead of sitting there going, well, I've never really done that, out of my depth, she goes, yes, I'll do it. And she, just what you said, I'll figure it out on the way. So she said that's why she calls it the power of yes. So she did. And of course, just like you, she got one rig, then two rigs, then three rigs, and all of a sudden headquarters of the oil company, which then got heard of by other major corporations, where she put fitnesses and programs in there, and it just went crazy.
Wow. Okay, that's bigger than me.
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure. But it was the idea that, I mean, let's face it, oil money. I mean, you don't get any bigger than oil money.
Yeah.
So the only thing that can even come close to oil money is Jewish yoga money. So. Oh yeah. Billions
and billions that I rake in every year. But it's funny, actually. I do very well for myself. I'm not going to lie. I'm very comfortable. Would I have done better had I stayed in Hollywood? By tenfold. Would I have done better had I stayed with Microsoft? Probably by 20-fold, because I would have had the stock options as well. But would I have been happier? Hollywood, I could 100% say no. Microsoft, I could probably say no, because I just love what I do with every ounce of my being, and I'm my own boss. So there's no trade. I loved Microsoft. I loved it. It was a really fun job. The people who went to business school with me, so many of them were like, you know what? I'm jealous. I wish that I could just do something that I love instead of something that I feel, earns enough money to pay whatever. So I'm not the gazillionaire that I wish I were. I'm not going to lie. I wish I had, many millions more than I have, among other things, because I give massive amounts to charity. And even when business is bad, I send it out of my savings. I mean, that's who I am. So I want to give, and I want to give, and I want to give, and you can only give what you got. So there's that. But listen, I think it's really important to understand that there are intrinsic values to the work that we do, and there's extrinsic. And I think we get so wrapped up in the financials that just go to bed each night and say, you know what, God, there are people who don't have roofs over my head. I may not have like the most fabulous, most spectacular, most whatever house in the world, but man, I got a house. Thank you, God. And as long as you could go to sleep each night and you've got food in your stomach and a pillow under your head, you're better than 95% of the world right there. So I've got everything I need.
Yeah. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
That's right.
So I always was brought up, and I always thought, and for a long time, I thought it was an excuse, was that I just want to be comfortable. I don't want to have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about a roof. I don't have to worry about a car.
Sure.
I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, and I'm just comfortable. And that's where I am. That's where I am now. Now, the money side of my brain, the MBA side of my brain says that's an excuse. The other side of my brain says, you know what though? I'm comfortable. I'm good at what I do, both for money and for happiness. And that's all right with me. You know what I mean? So I work a 9 to 5. I have a 40-hour job that I do in IT. It's not a bad job. I don't mind it. I always thought there's like when the alarm wakes up in the morning, there are 3 types of people. There's a person that wakes up and goes, it's another day. Let's bang this sucker out. I am ready to freaking rock and roll. There's the middle guy that the alarm goes off and it's like, all right, I got to go to work. I don't mind going to work, but I'd rather not go, but I don't mind it.
Sure.
And then there's a third guy who just keeps hitting the snooze bar because he wants nothing to do with what's going on. Does not want to go to work. Is everything about going to work is a hassle, is a chore, and is just miserable, right? And number 2 is okay. Hopefully that's a transition, but you want to be that number 1 guy. You want to be that number 1 person.
100%.
Yeah. And it sounds like you are that number 1 person.
I'm number 1.
Right. No, exactly. See, I'm still singing your praises, Shana.
Thanks.
So you're still getting it. You're not 17 anymore, but I'm still singing praises.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So let's cap this off with, give me, if you met someone who is on the verge, right? Maybe they've got a job that they're not so crazy about. They don't mind doing it, but they have a side hustle that if they were able to put all their time into it, they could probably do something with it and make that their living. What are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would give them?
Oh boy.
Putting you on the spot. Totally.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, I think that if you're going to leave everything behind, make sure that you're willing to go balls to the walls. There's no 50% when you're leaving your life behind, right? So that would be number 1. Number 2 is you have to trust in yourself. And I think that so many of us are so dependent on other people, either recognizing or validating us, that we second guess our own power and our own awesome. So number 2 is don't worry what anybody says. You need to follow your vision, but you've got to believe in your vision, because otherwise it's just a daydream. And number 3 is you need to commit to making yourself better every single day of your life. If you want to do something that's better than what you're doing today, you're going to have to be better or win the lottery. Can I give 4 tips? Number 4 is win the lottery.
All right. Yeah, no, that's great. That's fantastic. So balls to the wall, 100% commitment, no matter what. Believe in yourself, believe in your vision, no matter what anybody else says. And you got to keep learning. Keep learning. Don't rely on what you already know. And you might be the number 1 person in your field or in your business. You still got to keep learning. 100%. It doesn't stop.
There's no space for complacency and excellence. They don't go together.
And the only way out of it is number 4, and that's to win the lottery. So
I'm working on that too. Believe me.
Oh, are we all? Especially what it's now. It's like 7 weeks or something. 7 weeks without a winner, and it's at $1 billion. That's crazy. So anyway, Shana, thank you so much for joining us here. I think there's a lot of great stuff that you gave. A lot of well-deserved nuggets for people that, hey, if you're looking for that new next step, that new life, that new version of yourself, or just to level up 1 level, there is a lot of information in this episode that Shana gave us. Shana, where would be the best place for people to talk to you, ask questions, see what you're up to? What's the best place?
Sure. I do live in the technology age. So if you go to YOGAthletica.com, and you got to make sure you spell it correctly, because though I do own the registered trademarks, so many people have stolen my name and taken variations of it. So it's just one A in the middle. But if you go to YOGAthletica.com, you'll see all my links to all of my programs, to all of my social media, to my YouTube, to all the things. And so, it's your one-stop shop if you want to find it.
Excellent. And we will put that in the show notes. So you will all have that. And I'll probably pull the YouTube channel and all that, and I'll put that as separate, just so if you just want to go there, you can. So again, yes, perfect. YOGAthletica, and check that out, and check out Shana. So thank you again. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And for the rest of you, we will see you in the next one. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.